They locked her out of the bank she built from the ground up. But by the end of the day, she owned the building they were hiding in. It was a Thursday morning in Shreveport, Louisiana. Warm already, just past 9:30. Danielle R. Whitaker pulled into the private garage beneath Dominion Federal's headquarters, her sleek black Cadillac humming as she parked in her reserved spot. She had been up since 5, finishing a report, sipping on a bitter cup of chicory coffee like she always did, and listening to Coltrane as she planned her talking points for the board meeting. Nothing felt off. Nothing hinted that the next 10 minutes would flip everything upside down. As she stepped out of her car, her heels clicked against the concrete floor. Her suit, tailored navy blue with a single silver pin near the lapel, fit like armor. She greeted the young maintenance guy with a smile and a nod, the same kid who always cleaned early mornings. "Morning, Ms. Whitaker," he called out. "Morning, Ray. You get that plumbing leak fixed?" "Working on it now." She smiled, adjusted her tote bag over her shoulder, and headed for the elevator that led straight to the executive floor. But when she reached the glass door to the lobby, something was off. Her keycard didn't work. She scanned it once, twice, then again, slower, just in case. Nothing. Just a dull beep and a red light. Danielle stared at the sensor, trying to process. She tapped the intercom, expecting the usual voice of Grace, her executive assistant, to buzz her in. Instead, a voice she didn't recognize came through. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to remain in the lobby." She paused. "Who is this?" "My name's Deshawn, ma'am. I work security now." "Where's Troy?" "Troy's been reassigned." "To what?" "He's head of security." Silence. "Deshawn," she said, lowering her tone, "let me in the building. I'm the CEO." There was a pause. Then another voice cut in behind her. "Danielle." She turned. 2 security guards stood at the hallway entrance. One of them, a heavy-set man with a clipboard in his hand, looked everywhere but her eyes. "I'm gonna need your badge," he said softly. Danielle didn't move. "What?" "I was told to collect your badge, phone, and any company property." "By who?" "I'm not at liberty to say." Danielle stared at him. She couldn't help it. Her mouth opened slightly, just for a second, trying to catch up to what was happening. Behind the thick glass of the lobby doors, a few people from the office floor were starting to notice. Faces pressed near windows, hands lifted phones. Danielle's voice turned to stone. "Tell me who authorized this." One of the guards shifted. "Ma'am, the board voted late last night. There's a change in leadership." "You're telling me I've been removed and no one even had the decency to pick up the phone?" "We're just following protocol." Danielle laughed, dry and short. Not out of humor, just disbelief. She reached into her bag and pulled out her company iPhone. But as she unlocked it, a notification popped up. "Your access to Dominion Federal Internal Services has been revoked." Emails were gone. Contacts vanished. She looked at the screen for a long time, then lifted her eyes toward the door where staff now crowded behind the glass, some watching, some filming. Her jaw clenched. Then she turned to the security guard. "I built this bank from scratch. You really think a keycard and a clipboard changes that?" He didn't answer. Danielle reached into her blazer, pulled out her badge, and placed it into his hand like it was contaminated. Her phone followed. Then she stepped back, straightened her posture, and said, "You make sure whoever's watching this footage knows one thing. I'm not done." But sometimes the lowest blow comes not with fists, but with silence. And Danielle had to walk through that parking garage like a stranger in the very place that once bore her name. Danielle didn't rush. If they were going to throw her out like a thief, she'd at least keep her dignity intact. Each step across the concrete echoed louder than the last, the weight of disbelief settling in with every stride. She reached the curb and paused, the mid-morning heat settling on her face. Across the street, a small cafe buzzed with early customers. She spotted a familiar face, Jordan Blackwell, one of Dominion's senior analysts, seated at a window table with 2 interns. Jordan looked up, saw her, and quickly looked away. Danielle took that in. She noticed everything. The way one intern whispered something, the way Jordan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She pulled out her personal phone, not the company one they'd just taken, and dialed. No answer. She tried her assistant, Grace, straight to voicemail. Then she called her lawyer. "Marion Price," came the answer on the 3rd ring, smooth and clipped. "They just locked me out of my own building." A pause. "Come again?" I showed up for a board meeting, and security met me with a clipboard and collected my badge like I'm some intern who got caught stealing printer paper. Marion didn't ask if she was serious. Where are you now? Standing on the sidewalk on Market Street. Everyone in the building probably thinks I've been arrested. There was a longer pause. Give me 20 minutes. I'll call you back. Do not speak to anyone. Do not post anything. Just wait. Danielle hung up, and that's when she heard it. A voice, too familiar, carrying across the street. Danielle! She turned. A man in an ash-colored suit with thin-rimmed glasses trotted across the crosswalk toward her. Walter Easley, Chief Operating Officer, one of the very people she brought into the company 5 years ago. He smiled like nothing had happened. What a mess, huh? He said. Danielle didn't return it. You were in that meeting, weren't you? He held his palms out like it wasn't his call. Look, this isn't personal. You know how boards work. There were concerns about leadership, about direction. Some felt it was time for a hostile takeover by the very people I promoted. That direction? Walter shifted. Danielle, the board felt... No, don't speak for the board. Speak for yourself. He hesitated. Look, you know how much I respect you. No one's denying what you built. But the last few quarters weren't ideal. You've been stretched. Because I've been in D.C., trying to secure the minority lending bill for this company. I know, but shareholders don't care about D.C. They care about numbers. And right now, they don't like where the numbers are going. Danielle stepped closer, voice low. Let me ask you something, Walter. When I pulled you out of that disaster at Sterling Union, who stood up for you when no one else would touch your resume? You did. That's right. And now you're standing here giving me the same speech they gave you back then. Walter didn't respond. Danielle nodded, more to herself than to him. Behind them, someone held up a phone. Recording. She turned slightly toward the camera and spoke with perfect clarity. Keep recording. You're going to want this for later. Walter's eyes darted toward the lens. Danielle, let's not do this out here. But she ignored him. Instead, she turned and walked to a nearby bench and sat, quiet, still, watching the people in suits scurry past, watching those who knew her, who owed her, pretend not to. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Her phone buzzed. Marion had texted, "You still have majority control. You never signed the trust transfer to the board. Their move wasn't legal." Danielle stared at the message. 1 beat, then 2. She smiled, slow and quiet. Not the kind that celebrated revenge. The kind that comes when a storm clears and you can finally see the road again. She stood, brushed off her skirt, and texted back, "Schedule a meeting. I'm going back." But if they thought this was over, they forgot who taught them the game in the first place. 15 years earlier, Danielle had been sitting in a folding chair inside a former dry cleaner's office in Baton Rouge, surrounded by peeling paint, a broken ceiling fan, and a dream nobody but her could see. That was the beginning. Dominion Federal was born from grit and spite. Spite against the doors that were slammed in her face when she applied for funding, for office space, for mentorship. She was told she smiled too little, then too much, that she was ambitious in a way that made men nervous, so she stopped asking for permission. She cashed out her 401k, sold the house her parents left her, and moved into a tiny apartment on the edge of town with bad plumbing and cheaper rent. For 2 years, she worked from that office with a space heater and a prayer, talking local families into trusting her with their money, because the big banks in town never did. And when Dominion finally opened its first real branch on Linwood Avenue, she invited every single person who had once told her no. Some didn't come, some did, and they saw a plaque over the entrance that read, "Ownership isn't given, it's taken. DRW." People laughed at it. They're not laughing now. Danielle sat in her kitchen later that day in Shreveport, barefoot on cold tile, suit jacket tossed across the table, phone pressed to her ear as Marion's voice came through calm and steady. "You never signed the trust transfer, Danielle. The board assumed you did, probably because they pushed the paperwork in your face 2 years ago when you were still grieving your brother. But legally, Dominion's majority stake is still in your name." Danielle rubbed her forehead. "They staged a coup," she said, more to herself than to him. "They tried." Her mind drifted back to the moment it all started to shift. 6 months ago, Dominion had its first public misstep, an internal audit leak. News reports said there were irregularities. The story blew up online, and some of the board members started whispering about new leadership. Danielle had spent every minute since putting out fires, managing PR, and cleaning up issues she didn't cause. Now she saw it for what it was: a slow build, a plan. Walter, the COO, had been one of her earliest hires. Back then, he was unemployed, just out of a quiet settlement from Sterling Union after a regulatory issue. Danielle had taken the risk. Same with Linda Prescott, the CFO now, who used to cry in Danielle's office over how corporate culture dismissed her ideas. Danielle gave her a voice. And Damon Price, head of risk management, who once worked retail after being blackballed by 2 major banks for calling out discriminatory lending. She had given these people a second chance. She gave them her trust. And now, they sat on a board they packed behind her back. Later that evening, Danielle pulled open a storage box in her closet. Inside were file folders, some still labeled with masking tape. She flipped through them until she found what she was looking for: the original holding agreement drawn up when Dominion incorporated. Her fingers traced the signature line, hers, clean and bold. The one line below it, blank. The trust was never transferred, and that meant something simple but powerful. She owned the company. All the votes, meetings, and whispers didn't change that. She picked up her phone and called Marion again. "What's our next step?" "You walk in tomorrow, not alone. I'll be with you, and I'll bring the documents. If they want a legal battle, they'll get one. And if they don't, then you remind them whose name is on the front of the building." Danielle exhaled slowly. Before hanging up, Marion added, "They thought you were mourning, distracted, tired. They forgot who taught them how to lead." But sometimes people forget. When you build something brick by brick, you also know exactly which bricks to pull when it all starts to lean. Friday morning, 8:02 a.m. The sky over downtown Shreveport was heavy with clouds, and the air pressed down like it knew something was about to happen. Danielle arrived in a gray pantsuit. No jewelry, no heels, just flats, her natural curls pulled back, and a quiet fire behind her eyes. She didn't come alone. Marion Price, her attorney, walked beside her, gray slacks, rolled sleeves, leather briefcase in hand. A woman behind them carried a small metal cart stacked with binders, contracts, and one crisp folder marked in red: Ownership Declaration, D.R. Whitaker Trust. As they stepped through the building's lobby, the morning security guard tensed. He reached for his walkie, but Danielle held up a single hand, not aggressive, just firm. "You might want to call upstairs," she said. "Let them know the owner's here." The man hesitated, then he picked up the phone. Upstairs, Walter Easley stood by the 10th floor window, already sweating through his dress shirt. Linda Prescott paced behind him, her arms crossed, chewing the edge of a thumbnail. Damon Price scrolled through his phone like maybe the problem would go away if he could just ignore it long enough. "She's bluffing," Damon muttered. Walter didn't answer. A young assistant burst through the door. "She's in the lobby." "Alone?" Linda asked. "No, with counsel and documents." Walter swallowed. "What documents?" "Didn't say, but the guy with her, that's Marion Price, federal regulatory attorney." Linda's face went pale. Walter turned. "We're not opening the elevator. You better be sure about that." Back in the lobby, Marion turned to Danielle. "They've stalled. Let me make a call to the district court and file a temporary injunction. If they don't open the door in 10 minutes, we can escalate this, publicly." Danielle didn't blink. "Do it." He stepped to the side and dialed. Meanwhile, Danielle pulled out her personal tablet and sent a single message to the press. "I will be addressing the public outside Dominion Federal HQ at 10:30 a.m. regarding false claims of termination and legal ownership." Then she handed the tablet to her assistant. "Post it across all platforms. Use the company hashtag. Don't forget the statement from the Articles of Incorporation." A second later, Dominion's own name started trending. Upstairs, the panic set in. Walter grabbed his jacket. "She's making this public." "You think we don't know that?" Linda snapped. "She's trending online right now." Damon's voice rose. "She doesn't own the company anymore. We voted." "We assumed," Linda cut in. "We assumed she signed the trust transfer." "If she didn't." "She didn't," Walter muttered. "I checked last night." Silence. "Then we have a real problem," Linda said quietly. 10:15 a.m. The elevators opened on the executive floor. Danielle stepped out first. The hallway went still. Conversations stopped. Phones dropped. No one moved. She didn't acknowledge the stares. Instead, she walked straight to the glass-walled conference room, pushed the door open, and looked each board member in the face. "Good morning," she said. Walter tried to speak. "Danielle, this isn't..." "Quiet." He froze. She placed the red folder on the table and slid it forward. "This is the original holding agreement, signed and filed, with me as majority stakeholder, which makes your board vote invalid, your actions unauthorized, and your little hallway drama yesterday a legal violation." No one spoke. Danielle looked around the room. "I made each of you. I backed you when no one else would. And instead of speaking to me, you staged a coup based on an assumption. You didn't even check the paperwork." Damon shifted. "We thought..." "Don't finish that sentence." Marion cleared his throat. "We'll be issuing a cease and desist to all current operations until a full review is conducted. If anyone attempts to block that, we'll go to court today." Linda blinked rapidly. "Are we being fired?" Danielle looked her dead in the eye. "I haven't decided yet. But when the people who tried to bury you have to watch you walk back in through the front door, they learn the hard way. Roots don't scare easy." By 10:30 a.m., a crowd had started to form outside Dominion Federal's headquarters. Local reporters stood in clusters. Some staff had slipped out to the sidewalk, pretending to take calls, but really just waiting to see if the rumors were true. Police officers stood by calmly, watching. And at the center of it all, standing on the top step of the building like it was her pulpit, was Danielle R. Whitaker. She faced the cameras, her voice steady, clear, no notes. "I want to be absolutely transparent," she began. "I did not resign. I was not asked to step down. I was removed without warning, without process, and without cause." Click, click. Shutters snapped. "Yesterday morning, I arrived for a scheduled board meeting on time and was denied entry to the company I built. A company that began with a single desk in a strip mall and a dream most people didn't think a black woman from Baton Rouge could pull off." She paused. "But what those people forgot is that I never gave them ownership. I gave them opportunity." That line landed. Her lawyer stood behind her, arms folded. Two staffers from legal flanked the edge of the steps, silently distributing printed statements to the press. Danielle continued, "I've spent years making sure Dominion wasn't just another bank. I fought for small business loans when no one else would. I opened branches in places banks had abandoned. I sat with families who were denied by bigger names. I listened. That's why this company succeeded, not because of some spreadsheet projections or investor charm." She stepped down one stair. "And yet, yesterday, people I promoted decided they'd rather push me out than have a conversation." Murmurs swept through the crowd. "I'm here today to say, not only was their move illegal, it was short-sighted. Because when you build something from the ground up, you don't hand over the keys just because someone says it's time." She looked out over the press. "Effective immediately, I am resuming my role as Chief Executive Officer of Dominion Federal." Applause rippled through the onlookers. A few gasps. A couple of reporters began whispering fiercely into their phones. Danielle glanced toward the office windows, figures peeking through blinds, frozen. "To my employees, business will resume as normal. To our clients, your trust remains safe. And to those who tried to silence me..." She stopped. "Let the silence build. I hope you remember who hired you, because I haven't decided yet whether you're keeping your jobs." She stepped back from the mic, and for a moment the entire street felt like it stood still. Then came the questions. "Danielle, will there be legal charges against the board? Are you seeking full removal? How did the board gain enough power to try to remove you in the first place?" She raised her hand, not rudely, just with authority. "There'll be time for those questions. Today, I just want the people watching this to understand one thing. You don't have to shrink to keep a seat at the table. Sometimes you just build your own." Back upstairs, the boardroom had gone quiet again. Walter stood, watching the live stream on his tablet, color draining from his face. "She actually pulled it off," he muttered. Linda didn't speak. Damon just shook his head and walked to the window. Across the table, Danielle's assistant stepped in and handed them printed notices. At the top, Executive Status Review, Immediate Suspension Pending Investigation. Back in her office, her real office, with the leather chair she picked out herself and the family photo on the shelf, Danielle finally sat down. Not as a guest, not as a ghost, but as the one in charge. Grace, her assistant, stepped in, hesitant. "You okay?" Danielle nodded. "You knew, didn't you? They were planning this." Grace swallowed. "I heard things. I tried to tell you, but you were traveling so much and I didn't have proof. I didn't know if I was being paranoid." Danielle looked up. "Next time, trust your gut." Grace nodded, tearful. Danielle leaned back, looking out the window. She wasn't angry anymore. She was focused. But just because you take your seat back doesn't mean you sit still, and Danielle knew the real work was only beginning. By Monday morning, the tone inside Dominion Federal had changed. The walls weren't humming with whispers anymore. They were holding their breath. Everyone could feel the shift, like when the principal walks into the classroom and no one dares to even breathe too loud. Danielle arrived early, no press, no entourage, just her briefcase and a small legal pad filled with names, notes, and facts. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, she walked into the boardroom where the 7 remaining board members sat stiffly in their seats, folders in front of them. Marion stood at her side, calm and unreadable. Danielle didn't sit. "I've reviewed the minutes from the last 4 closed-door sessions. 3 of you authorized actions without proper board-wide votes. 2 of you failed to disclose conflicts of interest, and 1 of you," she looked straight at Damon, "attempted to access internal payroll systems using my credentials the day before I was locked out." Damon shifted in his chair, the color draining from his face. "You all thought I'd panic, that I'd lash out. You wanted me emotional, because it's easier to call a woman unstable than to admit she's outsmarted you." No one dared to meet her eyes. "So, here's what's going to happen," Danielle said, flipping open her notepad. "Linda Prescott, CFO, you're suspended indefinitely pending an internal audit." Linda opened her mouth, stunned. "You don't have the authority." "I do." "Marion?" Marion slid a folder across the table. As of Friday, Danielle resumed full executive powers under Dominion's founding agreement. The board's authority is now advisory, not executive. Danielle kept going. "Damon Price, your access to all systems is revoked, effective immediately. You will be escorted out of the building by HR. Today." "What? You can't—" "You used my name to enter private systems. You made this easy." Damon pushed his chair back too quickly and stormed out without a word. The door slammed behind him. Danielle turned next to Walter. "I should fire you," she said. Walter didn't flinch. "Then do it." "But I won't," she said. "Not yet." He blinked. "I want you to stay and look me in the face every morning. Sit in the meetings. Watch me undo every move you made. That'll hurt more." The room went still. Walter lowered his eyes. Danielle closed her notepad. "I started this bank so that people who looked like me, who came from families like mine, wouldn't have to beg for respect. I gave you positions of power, hoping you'd protect that vision. You didn't. You protected yourselves." She looked around the room. "I don't run this place to make you comfortable. I run it to make sure people outside these walls get a fair chance." Then she stood. "Consider this the last time I explain myself to any of you." That afternoon, as Danielle walked through the halls of Dominion, people moved differently. Not afraid, just aware. She made her way to the HR floor and sat down with every department head one by one. No anger, no blame, just a simple question. "Why did you stay silent?" Some gave honest answers. "Fear." "Confusion." "I thought you were stepping down." Others offered apologies. A few couldn't look her in the eye. And Danielle didn't lash out. She took notes. She listened. She nodded. She understood something now. Most people don't fight for what's right until they see someone else do it first. Later that week, Danielle held a town hall with all 260 Dominion employees, both in person and remote. No script, no podium. She stood in front of a whiteboard with 2 words written in bold. "Who's accountable?" "I don't care about saving face," she said. "I care about fixing the foundation. That means all of us have to own our silence, our shortcuts, and our fear." She scanned the room. "If you ever see something that doesn't feel right, say something, even if it's about me." She paused, then added, "Especially if it's about me." That landed heavier than anything else. But leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the first one to speak up when everything goes quiet. 2 weeks later, Danielle sat in her office alone. No meetings, no media. Just her, a notebook, and the soft murmur of a jazz record playing in the background. something old from her father's collection. She stared out the window at the slow-moving traffic below, then down at the legal pad in front of her. Pages filled with handwriting, arrows, names, circles. A plan. She wasn't rebuilding Dominion, she was reimagining it. There was a knock at the door. Grace stepped in quietly. "Press conference is ready whenever you are." Danielle nodded and stood. No nerves this time. No mask to wear. She wasn't walking into a room trying to prove anything. She was the room. At 11:00 a.m., reporters gathered once again outside Dominion Federal's headquarters. This time, there were no gasps, no rumors, no scrambling. They were here because Danielle had asked them to be. She stepped up to the podium and adjusted the mic herself. "Thank you all for being here." She didn't look at her notes. She didn't need them. "A lot of people have asked me what I plan to do now that I've taken back control of Dominion Federal. Some expected lawsuits. Others expected retaliation. That's not what they're getting." She looked straight at the cameras. What they're getting is something bigger. A real conversation about trust, power, and how quickly we forget the people who make it possible for us to be where we are. She took a breath. "I spent most of my life trying to be acceptable enough to sit at someone else's table. When I realized that table was never built for me, I made my own." A few nods in the crowd. But what I didn't prepare for, what I should have prepared for, was what happens when the people you invite to sit beside you start thinking they can push you out. She paused, then said clearly, "Loyalty isn't about smiling in someone's face. It's about remembering who gave you your seat when no one else would." A few murmurs moved through the crowd. "I'm not going to lie to you. What happened hurt. I trusted people who saw me as a stepping stone. I ignored signs I shouldn't have. And I paid the price." Her voice tightened, just for a second, but she steadied it. "But here's the truth. I'm not the victim. I'm the blueprint." That line hit. Hard. "I didn't come here to preach. I came here to remind you of something important, especially to every woman, every person of color, every builder out there who's ever been asked to move aside for the next phase." She leaned in slightly. "Never sign away your power just to make people feel comfortable. If they're uncomfortable around strength, let them squirm." She closed the folder in front of her, done with the script. Dominion Federal will continue operating under new leadership standards. We're not just changing faces, we're changing systems. No more silence. No more shadows. From here on out, the table we build will be transparent, accountable, and loud. She looked out across the rows of reporters, staff, strangers. "And if anyone thinks I've gone soft..." A pause. She smiled. "Try me." She turned and walked back into the building, heels tapping against the stone, this time not toward chaos, but toward clarity. That evening, Danielle sat with Grace in her office as the sun dropped low over the city. The lights were off, just warm orange coming through the blinds. "You think they'll try again?" Grace asked. Danielle took a sip from her coffee. "They always do, but next time, we won't be quiet." There was a beat of silence. Then Danielle added, almost to herself, "They don't get to write the ending, I do." Here's the truth. People will forget how much you gave, how many hours you stayed late, how many sacrifices you made to keep something alive. But if you know your worth, really know it, there's not a boardroom or building on this planet that can steal that from you. So protect your name, protect your vision, and never let loyalty stop you from choosing yourself when it counts. Because power isn't about being feared, it's about being remembered. If this story made you feel something, share it. Someone out there is sitting in silence, afraid to speak up. Be the reason they don't feel alone.